Good morning, everyone. I want to invite my fellow panelists to come on video. All right. Good to see all of your beautiful faces this morning. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for creating an accessible NYC tech workforce pipeline. We hope you will enjoy the discussion this morning. We've got some really amazing panelists, and we are inspired by the work that took place and look forward to being in conversation with all of you. We'd like to just introduce ourselves. My name is Nycha Lagos. I am a senior consultant with Urbane Development, which is a community economic development firm based in New York City. And we work to build bridges to community wealth through research consulting and place-based development. And I go by she, her, and just a brief description of me. I've got short, dark brown curly hair. I'm wearing a dark blue blazer and sitting in front of my favorite compilation of basketball courts that my husband put up on our wall just for fun. And I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Preeti.
Hi, my name's Preeti Sodhi. I am currently working as the Director of Community Engagement with Friends of the Highline. My pronouns are she and her. And in terms of the description, I have short black hair. I am wearing a black blazer, and I'm sitting in front of a minimalist painting.
Hi, I'm Nadine Mulling. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Assistant Director for at the Center for Personal Financial Health at Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation. I'm also the Director for Jobs Plus at Restoration as well. Yeah, so I'm sitting in front of a huge clock because I actually have a lot of them around my house in different variations. It's a fun thing of mine. And really excited to be here to join this conversation. It's very timely.
Juan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Juan Perez. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Hybrid Media. We are a growth and marketing company based in Bed-Stuy, and my pronouns are he and him. Our organization really works with other organizations and partners that are very passionate about responsibly communicating and engaging with the multicultural marketplace. I am wearing, I actually looked this up. This is a Tattersall checkered shirt. And I have on brown glasses, and I am standing in front of our gray wall with, I think there's about 16 of our favorite partners that we've worked with over the years.
Thank you, Juan. And unfortunately, I have to share that we're missing a member of our panel today. Our dear friend and colleague, Donnette Pinkney, couldn't be with us due to a family emergency, so our thoughts are with her. Hopefully everything works out okay. Really, we were looking forward to having her speak with all of you because she is not only a Marcy resident, but she played a critical role in this project as a community coach. But we'll do our best to share some of the insights that she passed along to us, and hopefully that'll be sufficient. Just as a matter of getting started, we wanted to share with all of you a quick video that we put together thanks to the cooperation and participation of members of the Bedford-Stuyvesant Nycha community. So bear with me one moment as I attempt to share my screen with all of you. Ebony, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you let me know if you can hear the sound for the video?
Sure thing.
Thank you.
I come from a country called, in a town called Bed-Stuy, from a village named Marcy.
I'm sorry. Sorry, guys.
I wanted to see what was out there, what opportunities I'd possibly be interested in. I want to learn, get out my comfort zone, see what's out there.
I wanted to become a YouTuber, so I came to check out your workshops.
I was like really interested in like what was going on and basically others people's stories.
All they need is guidance. All they need is to see someone, just not Jay-Z or a basketball player, come from this neighborhood and be successful. Everyday people.
At first, I was kind of sketchy about it, but I really like it a lot. I'm learning a lot.
Today, I just found somebody that's close to my neighborhood. He owns a company that I didn't know exists at all, and he opened my eyes.
Let's go. Yes, that's one program I'm really interested in. The whole idea of learning about like tech and possibly going into that field really excites me.
I can apply the skills that I already learned and have to my new job.
You gave people the tools to achieve certain things, especially those young people that was like, I need this.
Okay. So hopefully you all could see that. I do apologize if it was a little bit grainy, but I'm gonna give a quick overview of the project itself, and then we'll jump right into the discussion. So let me just get in here. So what is this project that our friends at Marcy, Lafayette, and Armstrong Houses were talking about? Well, in 2019, the New York City Economic Development Corporation issued an RFEI looking for strategies on how to create a more inclusive tech workforce here in the 5 boroughs. And Urbane, in partnership with Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, came up with a project to get to the root of what it means to have a truly place-based approach to workforce development, specifically in tech, where we know that POC populations are still grossly underrepresented. So the goals of the project were really to understand, focusing on Nycha, to understand what Nycha resident perspectives on the tech sector actually were, not going in with any assumptions, but rather having kind of a wide open and blank canvas to really ask people directly, what do you think these opportunities are and how do you think that relates to you? Secondarily, to uncover skills, existing skills, assets, and interests of residents, as well as the barriers that they continue to face with respect to the tech workforce. And when I say tech workforce, we were not just talking about jobs that involve coding and information technology, but also things that are tech adjacent, because the tech sector is so broad and the tentacles are everywhere in our economy now. So really understanding what that means for folks in terms of ladders and lattices within the job market. Then we wanted to identify opportunities for improving cultural competency in the pipeline, as well as accessibility. And last but not least, develop some actionable strategies and recommendations based on our findings. So the methodology for the project was really sort of 3 main buckets. The first is a literature review. I think that for many folks that are practicing planners and community economic development folks, this is not common. You want to get a lay of the landscape. So really we focused on national and local research about the tech sector, workforce development practices, Nycha resident demographics, and Bed-Stuy context. Then we moved into more of the primary research phase. So stakeholder interviews, we had many conversations, 27 in total, with over 43 public housing service providers, workforce development professionals, employers, and recruiters. And then the most important part of the overall primary research was really the community workshops. So we held 3 workshops. It was a series with the residents of Marcy Houses, Lafayette Gardens, and Armstrong Houses. And really what we were trying to do is a few simultaneous things. The first is to really map out the landscape of what this pipeline looks like. So this is a snapshot of essentially what we found, and this will come to no surprise for practitioners that are looking at workforce development. Really, you've got the introduction to opportunities, moving through skill building, different stakeholders that are connectors, and then there's an entrepreneurial piece for folks who are starting their businesses. So at the beginning of the pipeline, you really have what we're calling the navigators. So these are organizations or entities that engage in direct outreach, bringing residents into the pipeline and helping them navigate training resources and wraparound supports. So some examples might be Jobs Plus, Restoration, Nycha, and an organization called Yes Bed-Stuy. Some of the pipeline stakeholders, these are throughout the pipeline, but really the supportive ecosystem, which we know is so important in order to give folks the strengths, the supports that they need, and the resources that they seek. So providers of key resources could be things like New Horizons Counseling Center, We Build Black, which is a trade organization for POC coders and developers. And then we have the tech skill builders. So there are so many in New York City, everything from General Assembly to Pursuit to Perscolas, which was a partner on this project. These are the folks who are actually doing the technical skill building and the training. But this would also include some of the soft skill builders, as well as entities like Brooklyn Public Library and others that offer, sort of ad hoc skill building opportunities. And then we've got the tech firms and employer liaisons. So these are the folks that employ, recruit, help connect residents to the various employment opportunities. Some examples might be the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Tech Talent Pipeline, the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development, SBS, and others. And then the small business support. So we know that entrepreneurship is very robust within many, many communities throughout New York City, but Nycha is certainly one of them. And so having the appropriate supports for those folks that want to take their tech skills and translate that into their own businesses. So some examples might be Nycha Business Pathways, and also the International Coaching Federation, which does a lot of support with Reese. So the community workshops, as I said, this is sort of the crown jewel of the project. And we're going to talk a bit more about this with our panel. But the 3 sessions that we designed included, this is tech, so really focusing on demystifying tech and those tech adjacent or tech enabled industry opportunities. We had a session on brand and kind of what's your side hustle or what are your skills. So really helping residents get to the root of understanding what their skills are, their strengths, and connecting those learnings to in-demand tech sector skills and tech jobs. And then how do you get there? So this is where we really co-developed a workforce training pipeline that was rooted in cultural competency, really rooted in the needs of residents and their primary interests. So some of the key takeaways from this project, first and foremost, the Bed-Stuy Nycha resident community has enormous potential and so much talent that would really add another layer of richness to the tech sector. And the interest in the tech sector was coming from a variety of motivations. We heard from many people that they were interested in being content creators, being developers, working in different facets of multimedia, fashion, even automotive. So really lots of different motivations for wanting to get into tech and tech adjacent jobs. Then, Brooklyn and Bed-Stuy, this will come to no surprise to folks here, but it really is incredibly rich in resources from a training perspective and from a supports perspective. However, all of these resources still remain largely disjointed and residents largely perceive them as inaccessible. Even entities that consider themselves to be in the community, there still seems to be some disconnection. And then human guidance, this is probably the the biggest thing that really informed the recommendations and the pilots, which we'll talk about in a moment. But human guidance and social capital were really critical to building these pathways. So even though we're talking about technology, the human element here as a form of navigation and invitation into the pipeline remains extremely important and really can make or break the pipeline. Success along the pipeline really does require consistent availability of key supports. So, essential things like childcare, transportation support, stipends where available, things like that, ongoing mentorship and coaching. That was really important to participants, regardless of age and gender and work history. People universally wanted mentorship support. And then last but not least, employers really are key stakeholders in creating this more inclusive tech pipeline. So one of the things that we really tried to drive home in our recommendations is that they stand to benefit greatly from the added participation of Nycha residents as part of their workforce. And really, we see an opportunity in terms of user design, user experience, informing those things, because too often there are, in our opinion, wrong assumptions about who the consumer is, and especially undervaluing folks that might be more asset or more income limited. So in addition to over 50 recommendations, we came up with essentially 4 pilots, that one is in 2 parts, that we have been, prior to COVID-19 disrupting our lives, we're trying to really share far and wide, and working on slowly gaining some support to see what might stick. The first is really tech workshops, which we used as a part of our research methodology, but turns out that actually that would be an incredible tool for aggregating resources, bringing all of the different resource providers, trainers, employers, community service organizations, community-based organizations together in a single setting where residents can easily access all of it in sort of a cohesive unit. So a series of workshops that introduce technology, that really highlight resident skills, and then help funnel them into the appropriate type of training for their interests, is something that we strongly recommend. The next thing is a culturally responsive Nycha Tech training. So this would be something that, so if you think about any of the technology trainings that currently exist, it would essentially be something that mirrors that, except that the curriculum and all of the supports that go along with it would really be tailored to the outcomes and the information that came from the project. So centering the resident experience and cultural context, and then adding a layer of responsiveness to workplace culture. So working with specific employers who can inform what their workplace culture is and help tailor the training to help to get folks to understand what a particular role looks like within their workplace cultural context. The next is a Nycha Reese Tech apprenticeship. So apprenticeship models, and many organizations that focus on workforce development and economic development in the city talk about apprenticeship as an effective model for getting folks into the pipeline for different sectors, the workforce sectors. And so we actually heard from a lot of the participants that they were super interested in apprenticeship models and were hoping that they could find something like that down the road in order to activate experiential learning and be paid for their time. The Nycha Reese Entrepreneur Enhancement is something that we think would be really interesting, because Nycha Reese Pathways is an incredible program. The Business Pathways programs are something that residents participate in and benefit hugely from, and a simple leveling up with particular tech skills could help these businesses really compete, especially now that we're facing an entirely new landscape with COVID and remote everything. And then last but not least, this is the boldest of them all. We are interested in piloting a universal tech training income for adults. So oftentimes there are stipends that are available to youth workforce development participants. That tends to be harder to find for adults that are looking to train and skill up. And so we are very interested in looking at a bold investment in the future workforce by removing that opportunity cost, which really is a prevailing barrier for residents. So what that might look like is, instead of stipends staying with a particular training program, they would move with the participant to allow for flexibility and meeting their own training needs and their training pathway, which might include multiple trainers. It might include some ad hoc, some full-time training work, and just allow them the flexibility and the respect to be able to tailor their experience and not have to worry about the trade-off between full-time work, making ends meet, and actually preparing for the future workforce. And then last but not least, I do apologize, this is a little small, but we created what we call a workforce pipeline navigator, which has, it's essentially a map of the resources and potential pathways through the pipeline, which we designed as a prototype for Jobs Plus in Bed-Stuy in partnership with Restoration. And the hope was that this could be a document that would be printed and sitting with the job counselors, folks that are working directly with residents, to help them understand what the various pathways could look like and really sit down and map it out with folks. Okay. So with that, that is an overview of the project in and of itself, and I want to move into the discussion piece because there's a lot to talk about. And yes, Catrice, we will make the slides available. I guess I want to start with you, Preeti, because we partnered with Preeti on the workshop development, and she's got a long history of community engagement work. And I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit more about the workshop approach, the content, and outcomes, and really, highlighting the role that the Bed-Stuy ecosystem plays in putting this all together and centering residents.
Hi, thank you, Anjaniki. It was a really great experience being brought in to work on this project with Anjaniki and the team at Urbane. As she mentioned, I have experience throughout my career doing community engagement work in neighborhoods across the city. And I think doing this work in Bed-Stuy again was really, really a fantastic experience. I mean, from the beginning, this work and the development of the workshops was rooted in a place-based approach, looking holistically at the neighborhood of Bed-Stuy, but also specifically thinking about tech and access to jobs in the sector. This place-based approach was grounded in every aspect of what we did, from how we structured the activities to which speakers were invited to participate, how we worked with residents with affiliations to partner organizations as ambassadors to the community. Bed-Stuy as a community was really at the focus from the get-go. In terms of like the content and approach of the workshops, as Anjaniki mentioned during the presentation, there were 3 themed workshops that occurred over the series, once a week over 3 weeks. The workshops again were This is Tech, Brand and Hustle, and How Do You Get There? While there were unique goals for each workshop, the intention was that as many participants as possible would hopefully attend all 3, and that each workshop could build on the one before. Participants were compensated for their time with dinner and childcare provided. The workshops were hosted at Jobs Plus, which is operated by the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corporation. So again, housing the workshops at a resource place, at a place residents recognized a central place in the community was really important. We really took the time to make the workshops as rich and full as possible, to be respectful of the time that people were taking to participate. The format each time was very similar. We would start off with icebreakers. We had a section called Building Understanding, where we shared information. There was an activity. We had a career pathways section where employers or graduates from training programs would come and speak. The format was really focused on building rapport, sharing information, and using the activities to bridge one workshop to the next. Again, we created unique activities for each workshop and also facilitation guides that could be used if we wanted to replicate the activities in the future. So just again, to talk about the specific workshops, the first one was really rooted in demystifying the tech sector, talking about what is tech and reinforcing, as Anjaniki mentioned, that tech jobs are everywhere and even at companies that are not necessarily tech oriented. The second workshop was really focused on skills and skills development, and also talking about barriers that participants may perceive to exist. You know, some of them may be real, some of them may be just perceptions of barriers to entering jobs in tech. So we really rooted the second workshop around that. And also for the third workshop and the final workshop, we looked at existing training and skills programs, and also workshop designing an ideal workforce program, while also doing a recap of the previous two workshops. We talked specifically about what opportunities exist. For example, you know, what is a web developer? What is an IT developer? Really providing more detailed information about specific roles in the tech sector. We tried to create, as I mentioned, fun activities that would allow residents to interact with each other and also to keep their attention. We had people to split into groups for the activities and move around the room with facilitators. And I think we're gonna talk more about this, but for me, just in terms of developing and executing the workshops, the biggest takeaways were the workshops were iterative in several respects. You know, the content was shaped as the series unfolded. You know, when we finished the first workshop, we'd come back together as a team and think about what we learned, and that would play a role into the final shaping of the second workshop and vice versa. We had a truly intergenerational group, which was fantastic. In addition, we had people with different interests, anywhere from building basic computer skills to focusing on entrepreneurship, to getting a full-time job in the tech sector, people who were unsure what they really wanted. Some of that was reflected in the video that played at the beginning. But so we had people with different interests who were all at different skill levels when it came to technology. A challenge was that we needed to find a way to share universal knowledge while catering to their differences, all while being in the same room. We used breaking out into smaller groups for the activities as a mechanism to balance this. We also kept this in mind when sharing resources or external training programs. We shared info on everything from where you could take basic one-off computer skills building classes at the Brooklyn Public Library, to more in-depth full-time training programs with Perscolas, to entrepreneurship, start your own business programs with small business services. So it was definitely a plus to have such diversity in terms of who came and what they were looking for and what their skills were, but it was also a challenge that we had to address and make adjustments as we went through the workshops. I can talk a little bit also just quickly about what activities we did. For example, I think in the first workshop, a career mapping activity where we asked people, you know, what are your goals and dreams? What do you think you're good at? Just kind of taking a view down, not getting into the specifics necessarily of what skills were required for specific positions, but kind of using this as an experience to get to know the participants, but also to get them to really think about what their interests were holistically and how that could connect to the tech sector. We did another exercise called What's Your Personal Brand, where people, again, filled out worksheets and talked about, you know, what different activities they participated in, what different businesses, whether side businesses or their primary jobs, just kind of having, again, all of this was linked to demonstrating to them that there were opportunities in the tech sector, no matter what their skill level or their experience. So it was a really, it was definitely something where we took extra care to create activities that weren't just kind of cookie cutter, you know, not that it's bad, but like, you know, put a post-it on the wall kind of activities, but we wanted activities that were dynamic.
I see some questions rolling in, and I just want to say really quickly, when we say we mean Donette, and the team at Restoration, because everything was vetted through these community touch points. Donnette is a force. I'm so sad she couldn't be with us today, but she really was, she and her counterparts, the other community coaches, were the linchpin that made this all possible because of the social capital that they hold in their communities, and their familiarity with Bed-Stuy Restoration's work and being that connection point. Really quickly before I move on to Nadine, I just want to address a couple things. So we had almost an 80% return rate, workshop over workshop. People really enjoyed themselves, and folks were very honest and let us know, you know, that thing worked and that didn't work. But really, before we even got to the group sessions, the community coaches were giving us feedback about what the workshops should and shouldn't be, and what would work and what wouldn't. So that was really important in order to make sure that we were connecting with folks. And the community coaches were the recruiting agents, so they know everyone in their communities, most people in their buildings, and in their developments. And so those are the folks who are going out and talking to people. And if they were bought in, then people would buy in. And that's exactly what we saw pan out in the sessions. So thank you for that, Preeti. Nadine, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the role that Bed-Stuy Restoration plays in workforce development planning and programming, but specifically around, you know, tech sector opportunities where POC folks are still so underrepresented. And if you can talk a little bit about your relationship with Persepolis and some outcomes as well, that would be very helpful.
So Restoration has a number of different programs designed to have a holistic approach to supporting people with career development and advancement, focused in the Brooklyn community and aligning with our mission's goal, which is to disrupt the racial wealth gap overall. So Jobs Plus provides, you know, a similar model where it's a long-term relational approach to ensuring that it's specifically targeted to particular Nycha developments which participated in this project here. So that's Marcy Houses, Lafayette Gardens, and Armstrong Houses. But really looking at the whole person, ensuring that they have, you know, wraparound services to support them as they, you know, pursue employment and as they maintain employment. And then the goal is really to, you know, ensure that those opportunities are high quality, you know, high wage in high growth sectors. So technology obviously is definitely one of those growth markets that is one that, you know, Restoration has been focused on. Oh dear, sorry. So I do want to amplify in partnership with the Marcy Lab School, a new program that we're rolling out starting next February, which provides support to individuals who have completed some training in technology and is really focused and differentiates itself in terms of providing leadership development training. So recognizing that a lot of people of color, specifically Black and Brown people in Brooklyn and across the nation, struggle even if they have the skills to qualify for positions, that once they get into those positions or once they get into the sector, they have challenges kind of moving up, and that they also have challenges penetrating the sector at all, so getting their foot in the door. And we actually saw that even play out in this project. So as Preeti mentioned, there was high engagement in terms of participation in the workshops and the projects. And obviously, the community coaches were central to getting folks engaged and excited about the programming. But what we saw in terms of some of the outcomes when it came to actually penetrating technology, whether it was access and even with the supports of, you know, Jobs Plus, there were some challenges with actually getting into a comparable role. And a lot of people were actually getting positions that were closer to, tech adjacent roles. So if they were in desktop support, they were getting a position at Best Buy, as a driver, hoping that they can work their way up to help desk, versus just getting that help desk, position, or even in working, in an organization that will be able to kind of help them, immediately apply their skill set. So, one of the things that we have started to do is even in our career prep training. So historically, it was just job readiness. It was really like, how do you have the technical skills? How do you have the requisite, interview supports or interview kind of skill sets to get the job, and then to maintain the job. Now we've kind of retooled it, and we focused, again, similar to what Breakthrough is providing, is, here are the requisite skill sets to get the job, but here are also some of those power skills that you'll need in order to maintain that employment and kind of take it to the next level. And so looking at kind of digital competence, and recognizing that, yes, it's having those technical abilities, but it's also having key competencies in order to continue to be successful. We've retooled our programming to provide more emphasis to drive collaboration, critical, thinking, the right judgment, and that can foster kind of like team building and really kind of getting to that focused outcome that, a team or an organization is looking for folks to collaborate intentionally towards. So those are some of the ways that we have addressed technology and looked at, not just the skill sets themselves, but also kind of looking at those key competencies that will help to drive people of color, specifically Black and Brown people, and getting into technology in a way that's intentional and that kind of lowers some of those barriers to success for them, not just in the short term, but long term. And we continue to apply the same, community-based approach, right? So we have a community coach, and then we're expanding with a resident champion program as well, to engage more people from the community and to kind of amplify the work that we're doing overall. But we also hope to use that in an intentional way, again, to getting people more excited about technology. The one last thing that I will bring out is, especially during COVID-19, we found that there is still a huge divide in terms of access. So even for those who are interested in, technology and might have, that minimal ability to really build up their skill set, you found that they either didn't have a device or they didn't have reliable internet. And that was a huge barrier. Again, through Jobs Plus, we were able to receive devices to give to some people in our communities. And so that was significantly helpful. But when you think about, the day-to-day, whether it's basic computer training or advanced digital upskilling, it requires that at home, day-to-day practice and engagement, and not just on the job, and, not just in a classroom. And so if you have that inherent barrier to, ongoing technology and practice, that kind of, amplifies the divide as well. So those are some of the findings. And, again, we're hoping that, with the ongoing training, and again, Jobs Plus, it's been really great in terms of providing targeted support to the Nycha communities, but just recognizing, that's another, area of opportunity to address, where, people from, lower socioeconomic levels, particularly in Brooklyn, we continue to see gaps there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Nadine. That's great. Thank you for those insights. Well, and we have an employer and longstanding community member on the panel, Juan. Would love to hear from you about kind of your role in the project, your role as an employer in the community, really, and sort of some of the opportunities that you've talked to me about that you see with respect to strengthening that Nycha to tech employment pipeline and workforce development.
Thank you so much for including me on this panel and this discussion. I am a Bed-Stuy resident, so I live and work have the benefit of living and working in the same community. You know, my offices right now are literally 2 blocks away from Marcy Nycha houses, and so one of the things that I've been very, very passionate about is about the workforce of our people. And when I say our people, I mean our community. You know, when I started this business now 16 years ago, we were trying to compete as a small agency on a level with much larger agencies with a lot more capacity and access to capital. And what I realized, and it took me a while to realize this, but was that we definitely had a lot of opportunities, not only to offer our community, but our community had to offer not only our organization, but also our clients. And I thought that was really profound in that one of the key opportunities was that, and I mentioned this during the workshop that I participated in, is that Nycha residents are uniquely qualified for tech jobs in the fact that they, you know, disproportionately face challenges that most of the world doesn't have to face. And that's really what technology is all about. Especially in 2020, it's about solving very small challenges that oftentimes are large hurdles for individuals. And, you know, those become blind spots for a lot of agencies that I compete with and a lot of technology companies. And I think that Nycha residents, especially Brooklyn, because I'm big, you know, I'm Brooklyn's biggest cheerleader. I really feel very firmly entrenched in the fact that Nycha residents really can provide, and there's a huge opportunity for them to provide some growth as far as technology is concerned, and tech jobs in particular. One of the things that really came to mind is that, and I think Preeti, you talked about this specifically as it relates to the whole employee, the whole person. You know, technology and has really focused very heavily on that, and you know, access to healthcare, access to transportation, access to you know, to affordable housing for their employees, and providing that as a means so that the employee, they can get the most out of the employee, right? But these are exactly the challenges that our people, our communities face. So in bridging that divide, we actually are able to not only solve some of the challenges that the technology sector has, but also being able to also provide opportunities for our community. And having the opportunity to participate in this program, in these workshops, I felt was a huge competitive advantage for me. Because as I mentioned, probably about 5 years ago, we changed our entire approach to workforce development. And it used to be sat down with a potential candidate and looked at a resume. I don't even look at resumes anymore because it's not really that important. As soon as you put something on a resume, it ages, right? My education that I had in, you know, I was a journalism student and had a double major in marketing. The marketing learnings that I learned in school some years ago are no longer relevant. It's about not only being, it's about learning, and it's about having a passion for learning. So we always say here at Hybrid Media that we're not looking for know-it-alls, we're looking for learn-it-alls. And I find that our people are very, very passionate about learning. So when you talk about people at, at all different areas of the technology spectrum, they're very passionate about acquiring skills, about learning more about technology, and that's exactly what we're looking for. And what we do is we hire for culture, number one, number two, and number three, because we want to be able to work with people that are passionate about what they're learning, passionate about where they're going, and passionate about solving problems within our communities.
I think one of the things that's most important that we really tried to highlight here is that there are people have skills. They don't even know what kind of skills they've got. And part of our work is to really help folks understand how that connects to your company, to all of the other Bed-Stuy-based companies and beyond that are looking for people that know the culture, are in the culture, and are really just looking for that open door, right? I do want to come back to, so someone in the chat was asking about, is this resource intensive, it's time intensive, the outcomes maybe are not going to give you that big wow factor in terms of numbers necessarily, not necessarily in this context, because we were very focused on three very important, but not the largest of Nycha properties. But I do think that there's a lot to learn from the overall approach. So Preeti, I want to come back to you about this idea of, how do you resource engagement that is meaningful and that actually follows an approach that will really lead to that kind of inclusive pipeline or the really well-informed outcomes that we're seeking, even if the numbers don't follow the formula that, let's say, some of the traditional funders or even public entities may be looking for.
Sure. I think moving at the speed of trust, which we've all probably heard about, heard this phrase, is vital. Community engagement isn't a transaction. It's based on relationships cultivated over time. So many of us have the experience, I'm sure, of community engagement feeling like an add-on to our projects. I'm talking, when I say us, I mean fellow planners. When the scope of a project is predetermined. So in that case, how can we say that we're truly co-creating with community? I think that the work of engagement needs to be resourced and given the time that it deserves in the development process of any project. In some ways, some of the things we did, with these workshops, like ordering dinner for all of the participants, might seem basic, but these sort of actions can sometimes be taken for granted. It's not just ordering dinner, it's creating an atmosphere of care and respect amongst the participants and the organizers and the facilitators. Again, with dinner, we made changes to what food we ordered based on community feedback from one workshop to the next. It's the little things like that, I think, that made people feel comfortable. Community members who worked for some of the partner organizations, the community coaches, they served as ambassadors to the community during the workshop series. And as Nycha mentioned, this was, I think, vital to have those relationships. Just wanted to reinforce that the workshops were developed towards the end of a longer process, as Nycha presented on, and as Juan and Nadine have referenced to as well. And by this time, Nycha and her colleagues at Urbane had cultivated relationships with community partners. So the trust was there by the time I came in to help structure and execute the workshops. And again, a template for community engagement activities can just feel like cut and paste from one project to the next. I think as planners, we need to focus on relationship building and the unique culture and stakeholders of every community that we work in. In my last position, I worked for an organization that developed a subsidized workspace for artists across the city. So I had the opportunity of working in communities from across the city on capital projects, building space. And I started developing a model based on some of my experiences working in the different communities. And one of the things that I emphasize in this model is that development doesn't begin at the conceptual design stage. I'm talking about capital projects, but this can be applied anywhere. Engagement needs to be highlighted at the beginning of a project, but then be a true through line through the development of any kind of project, whether it's workshop development, building a space, what have you. I'm still like, for myself thinking about this further, but I feel like what the point is that as planners, we need to create new models that are adopted by the field and the institutions that we work with. We need to demand that there's resources in our budgets to do this work. Budgets, our statement of values. We need to cultivate residents and stakeholders as community-based planners, and we need to shift thinking and practice beyond our own individual work. I think, the work that we did, all of us together on this project is really great, but we need to find ways to create models so what worked here can be replicated. And again, I just wanted to reference another presenter. I wanted to really celebrate Black space in this moment. I personally find their Black Space Manifesto to be such an inspiration. Moving at the speed of trust is one of the aspects that it references, but also centering lived experience and seeking out people who are often in the margins and bringing them into the process.
Thank you, Preeti. Yes, the topic of trust, or the importance of trust, I think is something that can never be overemphasized. And especially when we're under deadlines, we've got project parameters, we have outcomes that we're trying to deliver on. That's usually something that gets kind of pushed to the wayside, and we just go with the most streamlined pathway. And this project was not that. We had plenty of hurdles, but the thing that remained true is that we spent time building the relationships, and we could come to the table and hash things out when needed, and get hard feedback, get good feedback, get it all, and be able to deliver something together with the community and produce some really solid information that hopefully the city can use, hopefully the state can use, hopefully HUD can use, because we did present this project to HUD just as things were shutting down due to COVID-19. So there was a kind of a clear cliff that we fell off in terms of spreading the word and trying to gain some momentum behind this. But I'm glad that Restoration was able to take some of this and move a few of their internal projects forward. One thing that I did want to just get some panel responses on is, again, this idea of impact. So much like Preeti said, I'd like to challenge everyone who's here today to be thinking about what we use for metrics and what really matters. Why is, reaching 500 people, why is that scale somehow more valuable than reaching 15 people and actually helping them in a significant way up the ladder and reaching an income level that actually will impact their family, their immediate community in a very different sort of way. So I'd love to get some thoughts from the various panel members about that as a different way of looking at metrics, deeper as opposed to broader. Not that it has to be either or, but I'd love to hear from each of you a bit about your thoughts.
I think that this is actually a moment, and maybe it can come in when we have questions from the people who are viewing, but like, how can we create a model as a field, for evaluating networks, for evaluating these kind of more qualitative things like relationship building, community capital, cultural capital. I think it's something that we should find ways to kind of collaborate together to evaluate, because it's tricky, but we all know it's necessary, right? We all know that it's important, but what the specific metrics are, I guess I'm building on your question and not answering it, but I think it's something that we should all like kind of try to share best practices and figure out like what's the best way to do this.
Yeah, I think engagement is this is the marketing guy speaking here. Engagement is very much a qualitative measurement. It's not a quantitative measurement. And I just actually blogged about this this week. In my redux of the presidential election, and looking at how once again we missed the mark as it relates to engaging people of color, and doing so responsibly and doing so in a way that really mattered. And it really has, when you speak about moving at the speed of trust, look, relationships are not efficient. So when we talk about scale and scaling relationships, it's something that takes the time that it takes. I remember one, looking at and going back a little bit, was looking at developing relationships in the Chinese American community here in New York City, and someone who was very, very well versed in that community offered some advice, right? And it was something that was very, very profound. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Talk specifically about the fact that here in the United States, we've been around for since 1776. But when you look at China, and it's been around for thousands of years. And when you think about the concept of time and our concept of time relative to concept of time, in other parts of the world is totally different. And we have this warped sense that relationships are built overnight, and that somehow we can measure success based on how many relationships we've developed. But what we need to be more mindful of is not just those metrics, but how we're impacting the greater community. So when you speak about impacting 15 people, what is that impact? It's not about measuring those relationships, ones and twos. It's not a binary metric. And I think we need to be more cognizant of the fact that relationships are not something that can be measured in ones and twos, but more so in the greater impact as far as the community is concerned.
So I echo a lot of what has been said when, we talk about relationships. And I also consider the time that we're in terms of impact and in terms of urgency and in terms of, the numbers of people that are disproportionately impacted by the lack of progress and support to get to their next step. So I think my question is, how do we marry both? Because when we talk about systemic inequities and inequalities, it's impacting, hundreds, thousands, millions of people in this country. When we talk about change and disrupting an industry to make it accessible to significantly more people, that is a quantitative figure. It's not just qualitative. So how do we, marry the two? Because it is absolutely the case that relationships don't, happen overnight. And yet, as we saw with COVID-19, there's a huge, literally, life-threatening impact, when we don't see the change for numbers of people. So I think that's my question. It's not really an answer, but it's my question to how do we manage, how do we have a mixed methods approach to solutions to disrupt the extensive and far too long, reaching inequities that people of color, Black and Brown people, in Brooklyn and across the nation are suffering from and dying from, in these times.
Thank you, Nadine. And yes, I think it is a really important thing to consider. Like, it's not that numbers don't matter, but we may be putting the emphasis on the wrong part of that equation, right? So I think it's definitely a conversation we look to continue with all of you. I just want to flag that we have 2 minutes left, and I want to address Kate's question that she reposted, which is about which aspects and resources used in this model could be replicated, acknowledging that it is place-specific, community-specific. And I would posit that actually the approach is translatable. So I think the way that we looked at the process for approaching a community, coming correct, and who are the key nodes in the community, figuring out who those are, like doing a thorough mapping of who it is you're talking to, why they would want to talk to you, and what that exchange is like, what you're bringing to them, and not just extracting. Because I think far too often community engagement and these sorts of projects where you're really trying to get to the root of what should happen in the future are highly extractive, they're exhausting. And there was not a single person in any of those workshops that said, oh, I've never been approached for my opinion on something related to X before, right? A lot has been asked of anyone in a low income setting, whether it's from the local community organization, whether it's from the local community board, whether it's from the local council person, whether it's from another organization, a funder, on and on and on and on, researchers, on and on. So I think it's really important to consider, and this was a big piece of what we did with restoration, with Preeti, with Juan, is like, what are we putting on the table that is of value that people can use beyond their engagement with us and beyond their informing us. And so I think that's a really important piece. We're at time. I want to thank our panelists. I want to tell everyone here that if you want to learn more about the project, or if you have additional questions that we didn't get to, and I apologize for that, feel free to reach out directly, and I will coordinate with the folks here and get you some responses. There's a link to a long form video. You'll see Juan again in that one, which is on our YouTube channel. And there's also a link to the full report for anyone who's interested. It's in the chat thread. And once again, we hope that you're taking some things away from this session that you can put into practice and into your thinking about how you approach community engagement in your work, and building community and establishing trust, working on trust always. We really appreciate all of you, and I'm going to stop there if the panelists have any parting words you want to share with the folks.
I think that, as much as we can come up with frameworks and plans and metrics, when it really comes down to it, is having people with these values, POC, in leadership positions so we can implement the lessons that we've learned during this work. I think I'm kind of tired to some degree of teaching other peers of how to do this work, and I'm glad to have the opportunity in my current role to help shape and implement things. So I think it's like sharing these ideas, but also advocating for each other to be put into roles where we can help shape these outcomes.
I'll just echo that. I think one of the things I'm really excited about, I always say this, that our people are just the most creative,